Every time you present to senior leadership, you're being evaluated on something that has almost nothing to do with your work. The executives in that room are making a judgment, often within seconds. Is this someone who thinks like a leader or someone who still needs to be led? And this doesn't come from your data or your slides, but from how you structure what you say. I spent 7 years as a partner at KPMG, sitting in countless leadership meetings. I watched people who I knew were talented and capable struggle when they presented to these leadership meetings. Not because they lacked expertise, but because every time they presented, they accidentally signaled the wrong thing. So in this video, I'm going to show you my 5-part structure that I teach senior executives to use for their presentations at board and leadership meetings. And using it will immediately mark you as an executive. So here's the real problem. Most professionals are never actually taught how to present at senior levels. Early in your career, you're rewarded for something very specific, being thorough, being rigorous, and showing you're working, which makes complete sense when your job is to prove that you can do the analysis. But something needs to change as you get more senior, and almost nobody tells you what to do. Because at senior levels, you're no longer being evaluated on how much you know, you're being evaluated on how clearly you can lead other people's thinking. And that requires a completely different communication style. But most people just keep presenting in the way that made them successful earlier in their careers. They fill their slides with data, they walk people through their methodology, and they carefully explain every caveat or every assumption or every alternative that they considered, because that's what used to signal credibility for them. But in executive meetings, it signals something else entirely. It signals that you're still thinking like an analyst, not like someone who is ready to lead decisions. Because executives don't want to be taken on a long analytical journey. They haven't got the time. They want to know where you're going fast. And if you don't give them a clear direction, they'll quickly form a view themselves. And once that happens, it's very hard for you to get the room back. So what I'm about to share is a 5-part structure. I call it CRISP. And most professionals, when they first hear it, think it sounds almost too simple. But that's exactly the point, because the problem is never complexity. The problem is sequencing. And if you get the sequencing right, then the people you're presenting to will stop seeing someone presenting information, and they'll start seeing you as someone who is leading a decision. And taken together, each component of the CRISP structure will completely change how senior leadership sees you. And the first step is the one that is the complete opposite of what most people do. The C in the CRISP framework stands for conclusion. And this is where executive communication flips the normal presentation structure on its head. So instead of building up to your point, you start with it. The very first thing out of your mouth should be the conclusion of your work. This could be your view, your recommendation, or your answer. Something like, my recommendation is that we exit this market, or I believe we should restructure the team before the end of Q2. One sentence with a clear position that you own. Now this makes many people nervous, because the first thing they think is, what if someone immediately disagrees with my conclusion? But here's the interesting thing. In executive environments, a clear point of view that gets challenged is usually more impressive than a perfectly researched presentation that never quite lands on a position. Senior leaders don't expect certainty, but they do expect thinking. And leading with your conclusion shows exactly that. But there's one thing that you then need to say to make this approach work, and it's the next step. The R in the CRISP framework stands for risk. So right after stating your conclusion, you name the biggest risk attached to it. Up front, not buried on slide 14, something like, the main risk here is timing. If we move too slowly, a competitor could move first. Or, the biggest challenge with this approach will be stakeholder resistance. Now this might sound counterintuitive. Why would you immediately highlight the downside of the conclusion that you've just given them? Because it does something incredibly powerful psychologically. It shows that you've already thought through the weaknesses, which instantly increases your credibility. It also demonstrates your confidence, and it removes the most obvious objection from the room. Think about how many presentations you've seen where someone delivers a confident recommendation only for the first question to be, but what about this risk? And then suddenly the presenter is on the defensive. When you name the risk first, that dynamic completely disappears. You stay in control of the conversation. The I in the CRISP framework stands for interpretation. This is the moment where your audience is going to lean in. This is where you give your view. This section is critical because it explains why you came to the conclusion that you stated at the start. So you're not just presenting the evidence behind your recommendation, you're telling your audience what the data means and how it supports your conclusion, your interpretation of the data. because boards and senior leadership don't just want information, they want your interpretation. They need your judgment, and they need to hear it expressed clearly using words like because and due to. So you may say something like, my conclusion is that we should proceed because, then you give your interpretation. Or I'm confident that this strategy will work due to, then give your interpretation. The executives that you're presenting to are surrounded by data. So what they're actually looking for is someone who can connect the dots and take a clear position. And this is the piece that most professionals skip, because it feels like you're going out on a limb. But giving your interpretation and showing how it led to your conclusion shows that you're thinking like a leader ready to own a decision. Now, it's really important here that you don't overwhelm them with data. Just pick 1, 2, maybe 3 key evidence points and attach your interpretation to each one. So once you've established your judgment, the penultimate indicator of an executive level presentation is showing that you understand the bigger picture. So that takes us to the S in the CRISP framework, and the S stands for steer. And this is one of the biggest indicators you're thinking like an executive. So steering is all about showing the people in the room the direction of travel, i.e. the broader implications of what you're recommending. Not just for your team, not just for your project, but for the organization. Or you may say something like, this decision will likely require a difficult conversation with the board, so we should think carefully about how we position that. When you do this, you're demonstrating that you're already thinking about the implications of your conclusion. And this is important because leadership roles aren't just about solving problems, they're about understanding consequences. And that leads me to the final step, the one that determines whether the conversation actually moves forward or not. So the P in the CRISP framework stands for plan. So you've delivered your conclusion, you've named the risk, you've explained your interpretation, and you've given the steer on what the broader implications are. The final step is to demonstrate that you have a plan for what happens next. So here you want to cover just at a high level what the next steps are and what your proposed timeline is. This signals that you're in control and it keeps the momentum up. Most people don't actually end their presentations this way. Instead, they end with a vague, "So, any questions?" But while this is polite, it hands control of the room back to the audience. You're suddenly reacting to their questions rather than driving the outcome that you need, as the first step in the plan that you just briefly explained to them. I'd like approval to move into the next phase by the end of this week, which is the first step of the deployment plan that I've just outlined. When you do this, you will leave the meeting having driven something forward instead of just reporting on it. And senior leaders respond incredibly well to this because you've made their job easy. They're busy and they're relying on you to demonstrate that you are fully on top of the path ahead. And particularly at board level, they're often not judging the problem, but they're judging your grip on the problem. And demonstrating that you've got a clear plan closes that loop. And for you, personally, this ability to move a room directly to a decision is the clearest signal that you're operating as an executive. Whenever I teach this framework with senior leaders at big companies, 2 questions usually come up. The first is, what if I don't have a fully confident view that I can explain in my conclusion? And that's completely fair. But CRISP doesn't require certainty, it requires clarity. And you can caveat your conclusion with your statement of the risk. So for example, you could have a combined conclusion and risk statement. So you may say something like, my current view is X, but this is based on the information we have at the moment, and we've got some further work to do, so there is a risk that this may change to Y as we finalize the project. That still shows structured thinking, and in many ways, the ability to have a view in the face of uncertainty is what leadership is really about. The second question I often get is, what if the audience expects the full background on what I've done? Now, in reality, senior audiences usually need far less context than people assume. And if they do want more detail than you've initially offered, you can be sure that they're going to ask you for it. And then that's an easy conversation for you to have. But what you don't want to do is give them 15 minutes of background at the start when they don't actually want or need it. You'll lose them completely. Now, if you want more tips like this, I write a short weekly newsletter. Every week, I share one practical insight for senior professionals who want to operate at the next level of success. The link is in the description below. But before you go, I need to tell you, while CRISP will change how you present to senior audiences, it's only one piece of the puzzle. Because the way that you present is just one of the unwritten rules that determines who gets promoted at senior levels. And most people have never been told what the others are. So watch this video next, where I walk through 7 things that top executives understand about work that most people never figure out. These are the rules that actually determine who rises and who plateaus, regardless of how hard they're working. I'll see you there. Just a quick request, if you're enjoying this video, please be sure to give it a like, maybe even a comment, and perhaps subscribe to my channel, because let's face it, you're unlikely to go into YouTube and search for my name because you probably can't even pronounce it or remember what it is.